afternoon. Good afternoon. And this is Module 1 of Goals and Sentencing. I am Instructor Curtis O'Neill for CJ 210, the United States Correctional System. And today, what we're going to go ahead and do is talk a little bit about the goals of sentencing. I want to share this video with you all to give you a supplemental resource to use. And so, we're going to go ahead and move right into it. So today we're going to be talking about the purpose of sentencing and the punishment. Of course, as we know, sentencing and punishments are foundational aspects of the criminal justice system. The primary purpose of sentencing is to promote justice, as we know, protect society, deter future crimes, and then, of course, assist in the rehabilitation process of offenders. So what we're going to go ahead and do is talk about a list of the key purposes around sentencing and punishment, especially with regards to some of the things that we just talked about: deterrent, rehabilitation, retribution, incapacitation, restitution, and how those particular punishment philosophies play a role with regards to sentencing and punishment. All right. So, in terms of talking about key purposes, here we see deterrence. We know the purpose of deterrence is, of course, to seek to discourage behavior by making the consequences of committing certain crimes and offenses undesirable. The deterrence, of course, is grounded in the belief that if people know the potential penalties around a crime or offense, they will be less likely to commit those particular crimes or offenses. So the role in sentencing with regards to punishment is that we know that there's something that is called specific deterrence, which focuses on preventing crimes from happening in the future. But this is done by imposing penalties that make an individual reconsider whether or not they want to offend. Then we also know that there is general deterrence, and that's aimed at discouraging others in society from committing similar crimes by making an example of that particular offender. So an example, of course, would be we look at mass incarceration in the United States. The use of long sentencing for crimes like drug and conspiracy, conspiracy to sell drugs, or gang affiliation, better known as STGs, has been partially justified as a deterrent. And some of this, as we saw happen in the 1980s and the 1990s, giving out long sentences to drug offenders or those drug dealers. But of course, part of that decimated many communities. And so we know that deterrence may not have been a great tool to utilize based on the decimation of so many communities. The death penalty is also a deterrent. States like Texas, they have the highest rates of capital punishment in the United States. But however, many proponents of the death penalty argue that that it serves to deter people from crimes. But then, of course, we also know opponents of the death penalty say that it does nothing to deter crime. And so we have those two different dichotomies that sometimes take place in the goals of sentencing. Let's look at rehabilitation. So we know with regards to rehabilitation, the purpose, of course, is to seek to reform an offender's behavior and address the root causes of criminal conduct, such as substance abuse issues, mental illness, or lack of education. Now, of course, the goal is to reintegrate the offender back into community and allowing them to be law-abiding citizens and give something back to community. The role, of course, with regards to rehabilitation is to address the root causes of criminal conduct. And again, we sort of mentioned what some of those issues were. So the idea, of course, is to address the issue. And then, of course, when we address the issue, the likelihood of recidivism takes place. And, of course, recidivism is one of those words that basically say, hey, a person's ability to reoffend, right? And so we want to keep recidivism rates down. We don't want people to be recidivists, go back into the community, and things of that particular nature. So an example of that, of course, is prison education programs such as CBT. Those are cognitive behavioral therapy programs that are really focused on getting to the criminogenic thinking patterns of a lot of offenders, right? Another program that is more of an academic program for rehabilitation is a Second Chance Pell Grant program that, of course, helps incarcerated individuals access to college, provides financial aid, and improving post-release outcomes. And so that really, the thinking is, if a person is educated, they'll have the ability to go out and be able to market themselves more effectively when it comes to jobs. And of course, the concern there is, of course, you got to have felon-friendly environments to allow an individual to get a job. California's Proposition 57, of course, that's something there we see that promotes rehabilitation by offering parole to inmates who show good behavior, cutting their sentences down, and allowing them to have the ability to address certain medical and mental health issues along with substance abuse and other behavioral health issues. Here we see retribution as a third punishment philosophy or a third key purpose in sentencing. Retribution, of course, is based on the punishment philosophy of just desserts. And basically what that means is that, a person gets what they deserve. For example, we all know sexual abuse cases. There's not a lot of tolerance for a lot of sexual abuse cases, not a lot of tolerance for child murder cases. These particular things, these things are frowned upon greatly in community. And so retribution is definitely it's focused on what is called moral justice. And of course, we know that it emphasizes the idea that, again, like I said earlier, that justice requires the offenders to face the punishment that corresponds to the crime they've committed. And a great example of that would be like R. Kelly. We've heard a lot about this particular case, and of course, the R&B singer was sentenced to 30 years in prison for his role in sexual abuse, what was also seen as systemic pattern of sexual abuse and exploitation of young girls. And so the sentence was seen as a form of retribution, and it spoke to others that if you're engaging in this kind of behavior, this is what's going to happen to you. So again, so it's a difference between, it's sort of right in line, right in lockstep with deterrence also. Incapacitation. Incapacitation here is the fourth punishment philosophy, fourth key purpose of sentencing. We know the purpose of incapacitation, of course, is to seek to protect society by removing dangerous individuals from community, thus preventing them the opportunity to commit future crimes. And the purpose is based on the belief that some offenders pose a continued risk to community by having them into community. So the focus is to remove them, don't really allow them the opportunity to reoffend. With that being said, whoops, I think I got a little bit hit on myself. Excuse me. A great example of that, of course, is that some states in the United States impose life sentences, of course, as we know, on certain individuals for certain violent crimes that include homicide, some armed robbery, and really don't offer any particular chance of parole. Another example would be what we know as El Chapo. I believe Joaquin Guzman is his name. He was a notorious Mexican drug lord who was sentenced to life in prison. His sentence was really designed not only as a punishment for his crimes, but also as a way to incapacitate him, to not allow him to engage in drug conspiracy. I believe he was the head of the Sinaloa a drug cartel, which was a global drug trafficking organization. Restitution is the fifth punishment and philosophy. And of course, we know restitution seeks to make the victim whole by requiring the offender to compensate the victim for their particular losses or injury. This can include returning stolen property, maybe paying for medical bills, or converting other financial losses caused by the crime. I do even know that there are some states that have utilized this particular punishment philosophy to address around issues around, for example, I believe it is domestic violence offenders that do this, as well as those individuals, of course, that have to pay child support, as also a big part of that. We see here that restitution's role, of course, is aimed at repairing the harm done by the victim, as I mentioned, and it really sort of helps the victim to process the injury and gives them the opportunity to sort of state how the offender hurt and harmed them. It gives them a say in what is going on in terms of the crime that has been committed to them. A great example of this, of course, is the Bernie Madoff case that we saw some years ago. And so, following his particular conviction for operating what we know as the largest Ponzi scheme in history, Bernie Madoff was ordered to pay restitution to the victims of his fraud case. His crimes caused, as we know, billions of dollars in losses to numerous people that were taken by this particular individual. So yeah, restitution is a big part of that. And then, of course, lastly, in the conclusion of it all, I just wanted to point out that, as we know, deterrence, rehabilitation, retribution, incapacitation, and restitution, of course, is those five punishment philosophies play a distinct role in shaping the criminal justice process. And of course, we know that the goals are we know that the goals sometimes may conflict. But they are very important pieces that address the needs of society and speak to the hurt and harm of the victims. Sentences also, as we know, provides opportunities for the offenders to reform where as possible. And again, again, this is a video that I wanted to share with you all to provide some type of supplement to you with regards to this particular assignment. I do look forward to presenting other videos to you in the near future. Thank you so much. Bye now.